Hello, welcome to Sports Today. You are live with me, Rajeshri Gupta, and I'm here to talk to you a little about India's test journey towards the end of the year. India, of course, they still have to play that one test match. The tour of South Africa has been rescheduled because of a new variant of the COVID 19, but India's still going to play that uh, Boxing Day test match. There's one test match remaining for the year, but they have been remarkable, haven't they? Again, yet again, in this 5 day format. Yes, they lost to New Zealand in that final of the World Test Championship. They lost to England at home. They lost to England away, one test match. But overall, it's been a remarkable, remarkable journey. And I don't say this lightly. Of course, there are stats to back up what I'm saying. There are figures to back up some sensational performances from young cricketers. But it has been that kind of a year as far as Test cricket is concerned. Of course, over the years, India have gone from strength to strength in this format. You go back to that Test match in Johannesburg after losing the series. That final Test match, India bounced back and won to come back with a bit of confidence, and then they, of course, went on to defeat South Africa in the ODI and the T20I series, creating a bit of history there. Again, in England in 2018, India did not fare all too well. They won a test match, but they lost the others. Some mistakes were made, some selection blunders. But then that was team. That was a team. That was a team which was still work in progress. There was a captain who was charged up, who was a fiery character, who is a fiery character still. But going over the next few years, they started truly realizing their potential overseas. Of course, when Ravi Shastri took over as coach, Virat Kohli was still a newly appointed captain. They showed their intent right away, didn't they? With their reliance on the pace bowlers, and Virat Kohli was very sure about what he wanted really from his pacers. He wanted these men to be the crucial cogs in the wheel to take 20 wickets and win India test matches. India radically changed their approach at home and overseas. Overseas, they relied on their pace battery to do well, even at home, by the way. Of course, the likes of Ravindra Jadeja, Ravi Ashwin, they have been stellar performers. But you look at the likes of Umesh Yadav, Ishant Sharma, of course, he's had a couple of really bad test matches. He's gone wicketless, but then you pick up the likes of Mohammad Shami, Jasprit Bumrah, who's played a lot of his test matches overseas. All these guys, they've come to the party. Umesh Yadav, in particular, that extended home season back in 2016, 2017 was such a brilliant performer with the ball. And of course, then along the line, you had the likes of Jayant Yadav. Then, with Ravindra Jadeja being injured for that series against England at home, you suddenly had Akshar Patel come up and and really bowl his way to some glorious records on debut. And remember, there was a time, wasn't there, when they all started wondering what's happened to India's reservoir of spin. Where are those talented youngsters? This is a country with Prasanna, and then over the years you had Kumble, you had Harbhajan Singh coming in. Every generation had one or two great spinners playing for India. Suddenly, with Ravi Ashwin and Ravi Jadeja, a lot of people wondered what is next for Indian spin, and then you suddenly have a surge of Yuzvendra Chahal, Kuldeep Yadav, these guys in limited overs cricket, and you suddenly see someone like Jayant Yadav, who can also bat, and as can Akshar Patel. So all these spinners coming in through the ranks in Test cricket, they can also bat, and they can really. It looks so well settled now for these to carry on the tradition with R. Ashwin and Ravindra Jadeja. They're not just really good spinners. They're not just world class spinners who can do well anywhere in the world. They're also really really good batsmen, and that helps a lot. But of course, this success has been in the making for several years. But I want to talk in particular about this year. Really go down memory lane to what happened, to what started in Australia. Of course, India had defeated Australia in Australia about 3 years back in 2018, 2019. But then they were without Warner, they were without Smith. Labuschagne was just coming up the ranks. But in India's defense, they played who they got, and they came back home with their first ever series victory in Australia, meant those 3 years ago. Last year, though, the challenges were going to be stiffer because now this Australian team was a full strength side. India, on the other hand, started off well in the first innings, if you remember, at the Adelaide Oval in that day-night test match, India's first ever day-night test match in Australia. Before they had played only one day-night test against Bangladesh at home, which they won. But these were going to be different challenges. This was going to be a completely different beast. Playing Australia anyway is difficult, and you play them in Test cricket in their own den. Nothing gets tougher than that. And then on top of that, you're playing a day-night test match, which Australia, by the way, have played a lot of, and that was something new for India to deal with the pink ball in Australia down under. It's not easy. They started off well, but Virat Kohli was looking in fine touch, in fine fettle. But that run out was a mix up with Ajinkya Rahane, the first test of the tour of Australia, of the series, of the four test series. And we all knew Virat Kohli was coming back home for the birth of his daughter. Um, and they really wanted to set the tone. Virat Kohli wanted to set the tone for his team for the rest of the series. It was looking good, was run out. Australia bounced back thereafter. And on that morning there, remember, India were blown away for 36, and there were murmurs, right? You remember, we did several shows on Sports Today, by the way, when former Australian cricketers, the Australian media pundits, the Australian journalists, all of them started clamoring for a massive 4-0 series win for Australia, because they said, look, India 36 all out, Virat Kohli going back home. And Virat Kohli, remember, he's been the singular reason India have been able to take on Australia in a couple of those series. Remember 2014-15, Virat Kohli's aggression, his batting, he was leading the charge for India. And that is when MS Dhoni retired towards the end of 2014. Virat Kohli, of course, captained in one test match where Dhoni was out injured. And after that, from the beginning of 2015, it really was Virat Kohli's team once MS Dhoni decided to step away and retire from test cricket. Now, with Virat Kohli out, there was a lot of pressure on the Indian team from different quarters, right? So many luminaries of the game in Australia said this Indian team now, 36 all out, a massive defeat to Australia in the beginning of the series. How do they bounce back in those three test matches? Sledging. Australia, of course, tried to revamp under a new captain. But when you're playing Australia, you can expect a lot of sledging. You can expect a lot of mind games. You can expect a lot of mind games from different quarters, not just on the field. It is a challenging place to tour, and nobody can stress that enough number of times. Really, is that bigger? It's that big a challenge. But then what happened? After Adelaide, India went to the Melbourne Cricket Ground. The hallowed MCG is where Australia have so often dominated teams year after year, year after year. That is when India came to their true potential. India realized their true potential. Having lost the Adelaide Test match, how could they bounce back in the Boxing Day Test match, which is a tradition in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa? By the way, India will play South Africa in another Boxing Day Test match about a couple of weeks from now, less than 3 weeks from now. But how would the Indians bounce back without Virat Kohli? Again, can't stress that enough. But what happens? Ajinkya Rahane absolutely stands out in that game. What a classic performance. He was, of course, stand-in captain once Virat Kohli left, and he responded with 100. Brilliant 100. Shubman Gill getting runs on debut, runs from Ravindra Jadeja. Yes, the top order imploded. And remember, even as all this was happening, India losing in Adelaide, India getting into a bit of a stutter and a wobble at the MCG, Rohit Sharma was quarantining himself in Sydney. He was, of course, out injured. He missed out on the second leg of on the last part of the IPL there for Mumbai Indians. He couldn't play the first test match. He couldn't in Adelaide. He couldn't play the second test match in Melbourne, and his return was hugely anticipated for the Sydney test match, especially with Virat Kohli out. You needed someone like Rohit Sharma at the top of the order. His experience, his calm. You needed someone like that. Now, Ajinkya Rahane was leading this really young team, right? There was, of course, Cheteshwar Pujara, who's had the experience of touring for India several times. Just the tour before that, Pujara had scored a truckload of runs, including that 193 at the Sydney Test. And that, by the way, coincidentally, is Pujara's last 100 so far in Test cricket. He hasn't scored 100 in almost 3 years. But apart from that, where was that experience? Shubman Gill opening the innings. Then there was a young Rishabh Pant. Riddhiman Saha, after the Adelaide Test, was dropped. Rishabh Pant, who was then backup wicketkeeper. made his way into the second test match for Melbourne. And from there on, started a sensational charge for the Indians. Ajinkya Rahane, like I said, leading from the front, the bowlers really pitching in, and you could see that there was a sudden surge in power for the Indians, and Australia were completely baffled with what happened. Their batting imploded, were bowled out for about 191 in the first innings. Ajinkya Rahane's 100 really set the tone for India in in that Test match, and India went on to win very, very convincingly. They went on to sign off 2020 with a sensational, historic victory at the Melbourne Cricket Ground at the Boxing Day Test match. And if you go back down the years, down the decades, so many Indian teams, so many teams from Asia struggled, and it was so difficult to go to the MCG and challenge Australia's domination there. The series level at 1-1. Everybody now started waiting with bated breath. What next in Sydney? And Sydney, by the way, is essentially it is a venue where most Indian teams would prefer to play. It's one of the venues in Australia where the pitch offers substantial turn, substantial spin, um, and India would have fancied their chances. But Australia, being Australia, of course, you can't ever write them out. Not in any condition, lest in their own den. A strong comeback from the Australians as well. And it came down to a situation where India needed to save that test match if they wanted to take it to the decider in Brisbane. If they wanted to make a decider out of the fourth test match in Brisbane, they were eager to win. It's not, they did not want to concede an inch. None was asked and none was given. That is where India's grit came into play. Rishabh Pant, by then, he had started coming to his elements. He played this aggressive knock, showed that intent, which said that look, we are here to win. If we do not win, we have the men to stay put and absorb the pressure and keep you guys at bay, and we will take a draw. But Rishabh Pant announced that intent for India, and of course there was some gritty stance from Cheteshwar Pujara. He took blows on his body. Did not get too many downs. Got a couple of half centuries here and there in Australia, but he took those blows. He stayed put. He stayed at the wicket. At number three, he knew that there wasn't a lot of experience around that batting lineup. It was becoming increasingly difficult. And then the injury list was adding up. Remember, Virat Kohli had already gone home. Some of the fast bowlers had broken down. There were some extra resources because of COVID restrictions, where you had to quarantine. These are not normal times when you can just fly a player out of India to Australia, and 2 days later they're immediately ready to play a game. You have to quarantine, and Australia were going through some very, very stringent quarantine rules. So all this was happening. You had players getting injured, and there was more momentum being added to the drama around India's tour of Australia. Now, India, obviously, Australia were constantly, they were unrelenting as well, right? And that is when Hanuma Vihari and R. Ashwin stepped in. Both men batted with injuries, batted with a lot of pain to see India through to a draw. And that undoubtedly gave them further momentum. That gave them further, it sort of added crescendo to their charge against Australia, a drawn game in Sydney at the Sydney Cricket Ground. And it was, like I said, gutsy batting from Hanuma Vihari and R. Ashwin. Again, the India managed to save that test match. India and Australia went to Brisbane in the final test, level at 1-1. But by then, India had also lost Hanuma Vihari and R. Ashwin. They had already lost Mohammad Shami during the first test when he broke his knuckle. By the end of it, they were also without Ravindra Jadeja, who had broken a thumb. Virat Kohli had already gone back home. Bumrah was injured. There was the top tier, the regulars in the Indian team were all gone, out, injured, and out for different reasons before that game in Brisbane at the Gabba. The Gabba is Australia's fortress. This has been their unreachable. It hadn't been breached in over 4 decades, and that is where India met the Aussies. Australia was charged up. Remember, during the Sydney Test match, there was this verbal exchange. There was a bit of a mind game from Tim Payne. R. Ashwin responded accordingly. There was a lot of sledging from behind the stumps, and somebody suggested we'll see you at the Gabba. And when Australia did see India at the Gabba, what happened thereof was just it, when talking about it almost a year later still gives me goosebumps. Um, of course, early January, middle January, and India and Australia to Gabba. You look back at that bowling lineup, you look back at who played in that test match at the Gabba. India, if you woke up that morning looking at India's team sheet, if you're looking at India's bowling lineup, most of you would be astounded. Who are these guys? You've never seen them in Test cricket. Where was Mohammad Shami? Where was Jasprit Bumrah? Where was Ishant Sharma? Where was Umesh Yadav? No, R. Ashwin, Ravindra Jadeja, and all of them. R. Ashwin had, of course, played a crucial role at the SCG to get India to help Hanuma Vihari and India escape with a draw. Ravindra Jadeja had played a significant role at the Melbourne cricket ground. This was how India's bowling lineup was looking at the Gabba. Mohammad Siraj, who had just made his debut during the series, T. Natarajan, Shardul Thakur. He had, of course, played a test match a couple of years back against South Africa, but we'd broken down during a second over. So he just bowled 11 balls or 10 balls thereabout in test cricket. And then you had Navdeep Saini, Washington Sundar, and of course, Rohit Sharma had to fill in for one of the bowlers, Navdeep Saini, after, and even Navdeep Saini was injured during that test match. Australia, of course, batted first, and this test match alongside, it has to rank alongside a lot of India's greatest test match victories, whether it's Chennai 1999 test match versus Pakistan. So I beg your pardon, that was a game that they lost, but I'm talking about those dramatic test matches, and talk of Eden Gardens, Kolkata 2001 against Australia, when India came bounced back from nowhere. Really, they had lost in 20 years back. They had lost the first test in Mumbai. Australia were dominant in Calcutta, and then the Indians, thanks to VVS Lakshman, Rahul Dravid, and of course Harbhajan Singh, just demolished Australia in that test match. It has to rank alongside some of the greatest test wins for India, and it has to be probably one of the greatest overseas win for the Indians. This is how it all unfolded. Australia scored a mammoth 369, and against a pace attack comprising Siraj, Natraj, and Shardul Saini. Washington Sundar was the sole spinner, also making his debut. And then India responded with 336. Look at those performances. Rohit Sharma scored 44. Pujara and Ajinkya Rahane got starts. Mayank Agarwal played in the middle order there. He got 38. But there was a moment in that game when India were in serious trouble. At 161 for 5, it collapsed to 161 for 5 when Mayank Agarwal was dismissed. 186 for 6 when Rishabh Pant was dismissed. But that is when the momentum shifted. Washington Sundar on debut, Shardul Thakur playing a second test match, they were involved in a huge partnership, and so important in the context of the game. Washington Sundar got 62, Shardul Thakur got 67, and not only did they get runs, they got those runs in style. They got those runs, showed a lot of aggression. Washington Sundar scored 62, Shardul scored 67, and India responded with 336. Australia, of course, after that, they were clearly unrelenting, like always. They responded with 294 in the second innings and set India a mammoth 328 run target. Right? Easy. Australia were not going to lose that. Who's going to chase down 328 against the Aussies in Brisbane at the Gabba at their fortress? But India had other intentions, of course. Shubman Gill, stroke field 91. He was outstanding in that innings. Unfortunate to miss out on 100. Chiteshwar Pujara batted for 211 balls, caught a 56. He ensured that he stayed put while the others around him tried to get to the target. And that was the best highlight of that entire series. Of course, they won at the MCG, but they were at a position of strength. They saved the game at the SCG when Australia were significantly on top for major parts. And then here, with a completely inexperienced bowling attack, they did well. They survived in that game. They fought hard, and again with a relatively inexperienced batting lineup. You look at the batting lineup: Rohit Sharma, Shubman Gill, the openers, Cheteshwar Pujara, Ajinkya Rahane in the middle order. Then you had the likes of Rishabh Pant and Mayank Agarwal taking baby steps in Test cricket, but they were not interested in taking baby steps. They wanted to take giant leaps, and they took giant leaps. Shubman Gill, like I said, scored that brilliant 91. Pujara and these guys were batting around Pujara one day. Pujara stuck around. He just planted himself at the crease, 2 for 211 deliveries. Ajinkya Rahane at number four, he came out showing some intense. He scored a quick 24, hit a 4 and a 6. And then it was down to Rishabh Pant. Mayank Agarwal got out in a rather tame fashion. Um, but Rishabh Pant, he showed that he wanted to clearly win that game for India. There was this partnership then between Rishabh Pant and Mayank Agarwal, beg your pardon, Washington Sundar once again. And then on, they just took off. And you could see the Indian dressing room. They were calm. They knew what Rishabh Pant was doing. And Rishabh Pant, when he plays those shots, he's sitting on the outside. You're like, oh goodness, he's just going to get out. But he knows what he's doing. This method to his madness at the crease in the middle. And boy, unbeaten 89 from him and those winning runs in Brisbane, they're going to stay with every Indian fan forever. India, of course, won by three because it was a thriller of a test match. A lot of people thought that India were going to play for the draw, but no. Rishabh Pant and India had other ideas. An unbeaten 89 there at the end, and India had taken the series 2-1 once again, which also added a lot of uh, fresh air into their campaign for the World Test Championship. Now, then they come back home, of course. I'm only talking about Test cricket here, remember. They take on England again, a very, very competent side. But as it happens, they lost the first Test match in Chennai. Again, like Brisbane is for Australia, Chennai has been for India, has been one of India's strongest forts at home as far as Test cricket is concerned. But they lost. They lost because of the brilliance of Joe Root. It was a single-handed effort from England's batting lineup, really. And Joe Root, before that, while India were doing all of creating all of these records in Australia, Joe Root and England, remember, were playing a series in Sri Lanka where Joe Root was in sensational form. He was scoring 100 after 100 after another. And then in that first test match in Chennai, Joe Root led from the front and India were taken by surprise. They were obviously battle weary. They were tired, but they took England on and they lost that first test match in Chennai. But thereafter, and the thing with India is when they lose these test match, one or test match here and there, they come back very strongly. They don't want to lose test matches in India. Forget uh, losing a series. And because of COVID restrictions, because of travel restrictions, you wouldn't want teams and players to travel too often. Two matches were played in Chennai, the remaining two in Ahmedabad. India were sensational. Rohit Sharma, again, leading the charge for India with the bat, scoring a brilliant 100 on a difficult Chennai pitch. Runs from R. Ashwin, he scored 100, took wickets, pocket loads of wickets. But there was one man missing, Ravindra Jadeja, who's been, like I said, such a key asset for Indian Test cricket. Not there. But nothing to worry about. Akshar Patel steps in and picks up one five-wicket haul after another, picks up 5 wickets on his debut, picks up a 5 wickets, a 5 wicket haul here, there, just completely overshadowing all the other bowlers in the series in his first test. And of course, there was this beautiful stadium in Ahmedabad, just such a good venue to play cricket in. And that day night test match, India just wrapping it up in a couple of days. There was a lot of spin on offer, and England was just not up to it, not up to task, and they had no answers to R. Ashwin and Akshar Patel. And then, of course, in the third test match, a brilliant 100 from Rishabh Pant. You saw how he treated James Anderson with complete disdain. It was awesome to watch that Indian team going on to build that legacy for themselves. And of course, the 3-1 series win at the end meant India were going to play New Zealand in the final of the World Test Championship thereafter. That was a disappointing game, yes. All the hard work for 2 years, India winning in the West Indies, winning at home, winning in Australia, um, beating a strong England team, going to the World Test Championship, just losing momentum. That was a rain truncated game. The match was affected by rain, but in all fairness, New Zealand had been there earlier, playing a series against England, but no excuses there. India would have wanted to, they would have wanted to put on a better performance. But Virat Kohli did say that, it's not just about the World Test Championship final. There's also the series to be played against England. After the World Test Championship final, there was a bit of a gap. India were acclimatizing to conditions. They were again in quarantine. They were in quarantine in England already for a few days or for a couple of weeks. Come that Test series against England, India responded so very well. There were some injury concerns again. Shubman Gill was injured before the series. Mayank Agarwal was injured, and Rahul, who had been out of the Test team for a while, making his mark in the limited overs formats, stepped up alongside Rohit Sharma, and they were so very good together. The first Test match was drawn because of rain on the final day, but India had the upper hand. I said that on Sports Today back then. I see that now. Had it not been for rain, who knows? India might have chased down 160 or 170. I don't remember the exact target they had on the final day, but they didn't need too many. And they were looking good. The Indian batsmen were looking good and had shown some intent. Lords, after that, the second Test match. First Test match drawn, Lords. They go to Lords, and there was again that Indian grit, that Indian fire on display. England had the upper hand at certain stages. Joe Root was scoring runs again, but there was this brilliant 100 from Rahul. Rohit Sharma got runs, and then there was this partnership, this decisively important partnership between Rahan and Pujara, who have, by the way, struggled with their form. Then that partnership was a slow grind, but it also what it did was it helped India, take that psychological advantage over England in at Lords, and then that partnership between Jasprit Bumrah and Mohammad Shami at the end. There was exchange between the Indian lower order and England's fielders, and that perhaps even charged them up further as India went on to unsettle England with a barrage of bounces. There was tension because Bumrah had bowled some bounces to Anderson, and it is apparently an unwritten rule between pacers of different teams. You don't target the other with bounces, but yeah, this was an Indian team looking to win a Test match at Lords against England. Not an easy thing to do ever. India, had, of course, done that in 2014, but over the decades, over the years, several teams have found that out. You can't really defeat England at Lords. You can't defeat Australia at Brisbane. But India wanted to change all that. We'll change it. Taking a 1-0 lead, India looking so good. They lost the third Test match. Again, disappointing performance with the bat. That was a bit disappointing to watch. But again, England playing at home in their own conditions, you'd expect them to come back hard after losing in their mecca of cricket. And then the fourth Test match at the Oval, another batting implosion, but in walks Shardul Thakur to take India to a total which is less than 200. But then that half century from Shardul, quick runs again, lifted the spirits of the Indian cricket team. That was a Test match again. That is a Test match to remember for the ages, with India bouncing back thanks to that half century from Shardul Thakur. Of course, you all know India won that Test match, took a 2-1 lead. There was India managed only 191 of the first innings. England took a 99-run lead, a 99-run lead. They scored 290, and you know that a 99-run lead is not to be trifled with in any condition. But India were not going to give up easily. Rohit Sharma in that second innings leading the charge for India with 127. Again, important runs from Rahul got 46. Pujara got a half century. Virat Kohli scored 44. And at the end, there were half centuries from Rishabh Pant, and Shardul Thakur scored another half century. Quick one, again another quick one. And Umesh Yadav and Jasprit Bumrah, again runs from the lower order, which meant India had amassed 466, and England was suddenly faced with a target of 368, of which they could only manage 210. And it was the Pacers again, Umesh, Bumrah, running through the England batting lineup. Shardul Thakur picked up a couple of wickets as well, and Ravindra Jadeja a couple of wickets there. Rohit Sharma was named man of the match, but a lot of us thought it was probably Shardul Thakur because he changed the momentum. He also got a couple of wickets, and most importantly, he scored his first innings half century when India were in dire straits. And to top it all, in the second innings, Shardul Thakur got the wicket of Joe Root, who was looking so dangerous. I mean, England had not really harbored hopes of victory, but they could have tried to save that Test match. That is what their agenda was that day. Of course, in the final Test match in Manchester, India decided to, the Manchester Test match had to be rescheduled because of a COVID scare in the Indian camp, and they had to come back home, and then of course travel to the Middle East to play the remainder of the IPL. Remember, the first half, after the first half, the second half of the IPL was called off due to a surge in COVID cases in India. India did not play the final Test match in Manchester because of COVID scare, and that Test match has been rescheduled to next year. So that series will continue, but that series, after that series, of course, there was the IPL, the T20 World Cup, then the T20 series against New Zealand, and then this Test match series. That was, of course, from England onward. This was the new World Test Championship cycle, and they took on New Zealand, the defending World Test champions. Again, in the first Test match in Kanpur, of course, this was as recent as a few days back. There was no Virat Kohli; he had rested. Rohit Sharma. KL Rahul was injured before the start of the series. Rishabh Pant had rested. Bumrah had rested. Shami had been rested. India were without six of the regulars, but they still put in a commendable performance, with Shreyas Iyer scoring 100 on debut, a half century as well in the second innings, becoming the first Indian batsman to do that in his first Test match. Again, stellar performances from the spinners. The lower order, the batsman disappointed. The top order was a little disappointing in both the innings, in fact. But kudos to New Zealand for pulling out a draw in Indian conditions. It wasn't an easy pitch to bowl on. Slow, kept low. The bounce was low, but Kanpur, well, New Zealand escaped with the draw. And no, you have to give credit to Rachin Ravindra, the debutant for New Zealand, and Ijaz Patel, who would later go on to create history in Mumbai. That was the second Test match, and Virat Kohli was back. And the pitch, in my opinion, I've said this again before, it was such a brilliant surface to bat on. It was such a brilliant surface for spinners to operate and for pacers to operate. Look at the way Mayank Agarwal got those runs. Um, absolutely stellar, right? He got 115 in the first innings. He got a half century in the second innings. Runs for Akshar Patel as well. Shubman Gill got starts in both the innings, scores of 40s. So you know there were runs, but and New Zealand, they did not arrive at the party really in Mumbai. Kane Williamson had to be rested. He was injured. Tom Latham was captain. Unfortunately for them, Ross Taylor did not deliver. He hasn't had a great time in Asian Test cricket. New Zealand were all out for 62 after Mammoth. Well, not a mammoth first innings score from India, but thanks to Ejaz Patel, who took all 10 wickets, becoming only the third bowler after Jim Baker and Anand to do that. Um, but unfortunately, New Zealand still going on to lose the Test match, and India clinching the series 1-0. Ejaz Patel finished with 14 wickets in the match, 10 in the first innings, 4 in the second. India's 325, and New Zealand responded with 62 all out. India 276 for 7 declared. Again, like I said, runs from Mayank and Shubman, quick runs from Akshar Patel also. And New Zealand were all out for 167, chasing 540, and India winning with 372 runs. So that was the end of the New Zealand series, winning that one 1-0. Of course, there is one more Test match to be played that will be part of that tour of South Africa. The other two Test matches will be played next year. But I just wanted to bring to you a summary of the Test matches for India this year. I can see a lot of questions. I can see some comments. Try and take a few. I'll try and take a few. I know it's been a long live broadcast, but it would have taken me a few minutes, and it's always such a joy to talk to all of you and talk cricket and talk Test cricket, especially. As I love the format, and I can see a lot of you do. Swarandeep Bakshi is saying, "Sir, it's going to be the easiest South African team to beat in South Africa." Swarandeep, I don't think so. You look at South Africa's pace attack. You look at the way South Africa have gone about the business in recent years. It's a pretty good batting lineup. Yes, you don't have the likes of De Villiers, Faf du Plessis, and you go back down the years. In you know you go back down the years to the years of Callis and Pollock, and obviously even further back to Donald. I mean, those were really good South African teams, but I don't think you'd want to write them off that easily. This is the South African team in particular. This is going to be a test of character for India, and it's not just about the South African team. It's not just about the South African side and the core; it's the conditions. How will India respond to conditions in South Africa? The last time India lost those first two test matches. They did well in Johannesburg, extreme conditions, and that's where the Indian team has also prospered. You'll have the likes of Koriso Rabada, Henrik Nakia, very very good pacers. These are two of the world's fiercest pacers. It's not going to be easy. You have someone called George Linde. He's going to be quite a handful. Keshav Maharaj. India have shown whether it's left. India have been found wanting against left arm bowlers, especially pacers, whether it's pacers, spinners. So it'll be quite a challenge for them. And then with the bat, it's not a batting lineup to be trifled with. Dean Elgar, Aiden Markram, fine openers in my books, very very good openers. Then you have Rassi Manderson, there is Temba Bavuma, Quinton de Kock. There is plenty of meat in that batting lineup. Yes, no De Villiers, no Callis, like I said, but then it is quite a strong team. Rajat Agniholtri, great recap so far, remembering these memorable moments, rekindle the faith of Indian fans in Test cricket. Thank you, Rajat. That is the idea, right? We all love Test cricket. We love the Indian team. We love cricket in general, and that is why, towards the end of the year, just a day after India wrapped up that comprehensive victory over New Zealand, it's as good a time as any to discuss cricket. And I thought, why not catch up with all of you over over some memories of Test cricket for India this year. That's just absolutely, awesome to do. Sunny Singh is saying, believe it or not, this New Zealand team bowling attack was weak. Wait, what is he saying? Yes, sorry, Sunny, I just missed your message there. Said, believe it or not, this New Zealand bowling attack was weak with medium pace of Southey and Jamieson. I disagree, Sunny. I don't think this was a weak New Zealand bowling attack, as Tim Southey and Jamieson showed. They were potent in Kanpur. They did not do that well in Mumbai. Was it because the Indians also wore them down? They have bowled several overs. Tim Southey, in particular, bowled long spans at Kanpur. Ejaz Patel, wow, what a performance that was from him. 14 wickets in that match, 10 in the first innings. Only the third after Laker and Kumble to do that, yet the only uh, one of those three to finish on the losing side. I thought Rachin Ravindra gave a very good account of himself in the second innings. The only weak link in that bowling lineup for me was Will Somerville. When you have someone like Mitchell Santner sitting in the ranks, why not play him? I mean, imagine Mitchell Santner alongside Ijaz Patel and Rachin Ravindra. Yes, that would have been a lot of left arm spin, but you go and look at data somewhere, I'm sure there'll be numbers which will indicate that Indian batsmen have struggled against left arm pacers, left arm swing bowlers, left arm spinners, and Mitchell Santner is a wily customer. He troubled India in the 2021 T20 World Cup. Go back to the 2016 T20 World Cup game in Nagpur. Santner was again in the thick of things. Who knows what he could have done in Kanpur? Somerville was very ordinary there as well. And even in Mumbai, when his role was to uh, plug the holes and not leak too many runs so that Ejaz Patel could keep on attacking, he did not do his job very well. So yeah, I was a little surprised. And Mitchell Santner is no mark with the bat either. Somerville, of course, is showed himself up to be a decent batsman when he was sent up as night watchman in Kanpur. But again, I think New Zealand missed a trick there. Yes, it would have been a lot of left arm spin, but wouldn't you rather pick the best players instead of going for combinations and matchups which don't work for you? Okay. I'll take another one from Rajat. Rajesh, how would you approach in phasing out the likes of Rahane and Pujara and Test cricket without these two in the middle order? Don't you think we would be a little short in experience? Well, Rajat, yes, I'd love to take that question, but the good thing is that I don't have to do that, right? I mean, I don't have to phase them out. The hard calls will lie with the coach, the captain, the selectors. But you are right, and I've thought about that. In fact, I was talking to someone about this just a couple of days back. You cannot phase out both Rahane and Pujara together. That's one aspect. The second aspect is I don't even think the Indian team is contemplating phasing them out altogether at all. Look at it this way. A lot of people raise questions on Rahane's exclusion from the Mumbai Test match. Was he really injured? Was he out because of his form? Did they obviously Shreyas Iyer would have played, and then Virat Kohli coming back? Who would you leave out? Mayank Agarwal and Shubman Gill gave a fantastic account of themselves in the Mumbai Test match. I get the feeling he will still go to Mumbai, beg your pardon, to the tour of South Africa, because you need experience there. And Shreyas Iyer, whether it's Shreyas Iyer, whether it's any of India's other batsmen, they will be tested with the short balls. Somebody said it's going to be an easy South Africa tour. I don't agree. You'll have the likes of Kagis Rabada and Rick Nokia charging in. They'll make life very, very difficult for the Indian batsmen. Um, it's not going to happen together, but I think in the near foreseeable future, at least before that happens, you'll see. I get the feeling you'll see both these men going to South Africa. Pujara will be integral because again we got those 47. Like I said yesterday, probably some brownie points in this test match when he got those 47. So you will see a little more of them in the times to come. I get the feeling they will play in South Africa. Whether they play all three test matches is anybody's guess. How they do in the first test match will decide a lot of what goes further ahead. But yes, you'll need Rahane's experience. And why you want to also play Rahane is, yes, he's not got runs overseas, he's not got runs at home, but before his slump in form, Rahane always did better overseas than at home. So you will probably need his experience. And the last time India played in South Africa, Rahane did not play the first two test matches, came back in Johannesburg, scored a couple of and scored runs in both the innings, scored some important runs, and he was integral to India's victory as well in that last Test match, a face-saving victory, which allowed India to come out of the Test series 2-1. So with Pujara, yes, I think he'll get a little bit more time than Rahane because he's at least got some starts. He's not got 50s, 80s, 90s consistently. Since the start of 2020, he's really, he struggled almost as much as Rahane. But I think somewhere down, you'd probably say that Pujara has done slightly a little bit more than India's number five batsman. Well, I've been with you for over 40 minutes now. I'll take a breather. I'll let you all, pour in your comments, by the way. You can still comment on what your favorite test match moment has been for India this year, starting with Brisbane, coming back home to Chennai, Ahmedabad, then that victory at Lords and at the Oval, and then, of course, the sensational victory against England, beg your pardon, against New Zealand and Mumbai. So please do share your thoughts and your comments um, with your please do share your thoughts and your comments on India's most iconic test matches this year. So this is how it has been then. Seven victories for India in test cricket this year, three defeats, and three matches ended in draws. Of course, the first was in England, against England, the first test match that ended in a draw. Then there was this game against New Zealand um, in Kanpur, and then the first Test match in Sydney. So three draws, and then they lost three games as well. One to New Zealand at the World Test Championship final. Before that, one to and then two against England, one in Chennai, and then the other one also to England in England. So that has been India's chart this year. They'll of course play. They've played the 14th Test match of the year in South Africa on and starts on Boxing Day. So we'll see. We'll see how India managed to end this year. Can they win? Can they do what they did last Boxing Day in at the MCG? Can they come and produce some stellar performances in South Africa? We will wait and watch. Thank you so much for your comments, your questions, your points. Like I said, you can still pour in with your thoughts on our Twitter handle or on Sports Today. Do comment on this live and tell us how you thought India did in Test cricket this year and what you thought were India's best Test match performances through the course of 2021 as we wait for 2022. Thank you so much. Do subscribe to Sports Today. I hope to see all of you very, very soon. Thank you.